This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. Happy Friday the 13th. We are going to continue back with the wrongful conviction of Peter Wilson. I'm going to be going over some transcripts today. I will be briefly reading or at least just highlighting some points in it, but I will be showing the presentation. So if you want to read that entire transcript yourself, you're welcome to pause it and go back and take a look. It gets extremely interesting at this point because we are going to be talking and discussing things such as laundering money and drug trafficking, and all the things that we actually find in the Zodiac podcast kind of runs in suit with this stuff that is happening. The law enforcement that are being either paid or are, just bad at heart, I suppose, because they're definitely not protecting the public when they're doing some of these things. And you're going to get to hear a bit more about that throughout today's transcripts. We're going to be looking over the testimony of William Coleman, which is the second roommate in the household in which Hak Ju Kim was killed. And my client, Peter Wilson, believes that he is the likely suspect. So we'll be finding out some of those reasons today because his testimony is just a bit sketchy and a whole lot fishy. So I'd like to welcome to the show Harriet Suchet.
Yes, again, happy Friday the 13th to you too.
We always love that.
I'm usually lucky on Friday the 13th because everything about my birth date, my name, everything is either a 13 or a 22. If you follow anything about numerology, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
I don't really understand. Yeah, then congratulations on your day. All right, so I'm climbing right back in. Last week good morning, Nolan. Let's welcome Nolan to the show.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I'm just climbing right back in. We left off last week. I think the last thing we talked about in this was that Linda Condren, the DA, argues it's a waste of time to introduce the exculpatory evidence, such as the cigarette butt and the semen and the sperm, because she doesn't want the jury to hear anything that would confuse anything other than an indictment on Peter Wilson. So following up with that, we're going to talk about, or we're going to hear what she has to say in regards to third-party evidence. So I'm not sure where I lost 182, but it starts off on, 179. Missing the first page that starts this paragraph, but she's stating that a significant theory, but the question isn't the significance of the theory his preferred evidence is supposed to support. The question is the significance of the evidence, and although it's true, if he had legitimate, reasonable evidence that gave a suggestion not only of the mere opportunity for there to have been a third-party culpability, but that creates an actual nexus between a third party and the commission of the crime such that there is significant evidence, that's one thing. That's not what we have got here. I have read this paragraph, Nolan, several times, and I honestly do not. I feel like she just confused everybody. Did that make sense to you?
No.
I mean, it's like
she's speaking politician speak. She's just trying to convince you that the world is flat.
Yes, that's how I felt. I was like, which way are you going with this? I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And I just don't understand. If he had a legitimate, reasonable evidence, we do. You're trying to block it.
Yeah. And why would the prosecution want it?
What's that?
The only reason is because she made up her mind that she wants to convict this one guy and damn justice.
Exactly. And that's the kind of the way I look at it. And I get it. I understand this is the second trial. And the first trial was a hung jury, likely because there was that third party culpability that was introduced. Now she's trying to block that altogether and wants them to focus on the fact they found his blood at the scene, but with no explanation for how that blood got there, because he's not covered in blood when they show up. He's not, you know what I'm saying? And as we go through this evidence, he's bandaged up, but he bled in San Francisco. He didn't bleed in Palo Alto. So, I mean,
I don't know how they found his blood. Yeah.
Well, we know how. The Michael Yore, the arresting officer, took one vial of his blood out of the property evidence on Sunday when the forensics department isn't even open till Monday, and he had no cause to do that. I've actually spoken to a couple former law enforcement officers in the last week, and none of them can make any sense of it. They cannot make sense of the exculpable evidence being removed from his file. They don't scan that page that says removed due to tariffs. They said that they've never seen anything like that before. Once it goes in the file, it doesn't come out of the file. So we definitely have some foul play here. So to go on, the court says after she responds this way, that's what's involved. There is no question as to the holding in the law as regard to this matter. It is totally fact driven. There was an item that has not been referred to by counsel, and that is the reference to a car, that there was a taxi driver described a covered car when he picked up the defendant around 2 p.m. that date. Now that matches Peter Wilson's statements that when he got home from the restaurant, that he saw a vehicle covered with a car cover and Miss Kim's BMW was gone. So I'm going to take that inference to mean that Mr. Wilson knew exactly what shape and style her car was, and that likely whatever car was underneath that car cover did not match that same style for him to have said that it was not her BMW. So we know that at 2 o'clock, based on both the taxi cab driver's testimony and Peter Wilson's testimony, is that there was a vehicle in that driveway that was covered by a car cover and Miss Kim's car was gone. So he says, this is the court saying, a taxi driver described a covered car when he picked up the defendant around 2 p.m. that date. What does that have? I'm not sure the inference I'm to draw from that. Mr. Parsku, which is the public defender, says, well, the evidence will also show that according to Miss Kim's family, Miss Kim did not have a car cover for her car. So it's certainly, and he gets cut off. The court says, I'm sorry, a car cover for her car? Like he's like, it's like he's saying, I don't understand the inference to this. Mr. Perisco says, for her car. Now, the taxi cab driver, she owned a BMW. She parked it in the driveway. She did not have a car cover to cover it. So he's basically trying to relate to the court and somehow doesn't manage to get it out that there was a second vehicle in the driveway when Mr. Wilson was picked up by the taxi cab driver, which they both testified to. So that being said, we're going to move on
to important evidence.
It's extremely important evidence. It's another sign of third-party culpability. So we've got a cigarette butt. We've got an alleged rape based on semen and sperm found on the victim. We've got a vehicle that is not identifiable by the tenants. Well, actually, the only person who saw this
not there.
It's later not there. And we're going to get into that when we get into Coleman's testimony. It's absolutely, the more I read his testimony, the more I can see why Mr. Wilson is convinced that he was the perpetrator of the crime. But I also play devil's advocate on that side. So this particular, and as I go through these, I'm not going to read everything on these transcripts. I'm just going to read the highlighted or brief what it is that I know, but everybody will be able to see the actual transcripts on their own end. They can pause and read them for themselves if they'd like. This particular slide, number 44, is what I call state's bad collection of evidence. So basically, they collected the leaves in the basement and they provided them to a leaf expert who identified them as being the same leaf that was found stuck to the buttocks of Kim underneath her underwear and her pants, which would indicate that somebody had pulled those down in the basement and after redressing her, accidentally scooped up a leaf that became stuck to her buttocks. But then the state turns around and sends an investigator back out to the property to go around the property trying to find leaves that match those in the basement, which I don't even understand what their purpose of this was, because the investigator, while at the property, now mind you, it's owned by a new person, he's out there taking clippings from a bush when that new resident says, that's a tree I planted. So this wouldn't be related to whatever crime that occurred here at the house. And even then, he only takes that sample and one other sample from another tree. And I'm not sure why they would do that. If you're going to test, you should test all the trees, which is Mr. Parascu's point in regards to the state's collection of bad evidence, is that they should have pulled something from every single living bush and tree in and around that property if they wanted to determine if those leaves in the basement actually came from the property or if they were carried in by somebody else.
Weren't there other leaves in the basement as well?
Yes, and those leaves match the ones stuck to her buttocks. But the two that the state collected from outside the house on the property did not match. Right. And one of them, he was specifically told by the current resident, is not, I planted that tree. It wasn't here when the crime happened. But that investigator still proceeded to take a clipping of that tree and take it back. Very strange.
Why? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's totally irrelevant. It has no bearing. So what was the state attempting to do with this leaf evidence would be extremely interesting to me. So basically, I'm going to start out with some of the things that are going on here. This is the William Coleman testimony is going to be read, and it's from I wrote 1996, but it's a 1998 trial that they read into the 2000 trial. And this is the instructions of the judge to the jury. And I wanted everybody to hear this. So the court says, all right, ladies. Yes.
Okay. So he was there for the first trial, but he split and was out of the country for the next one.
I think that once the
prior testimony in the next one.
Correct. And this is where I say I kind of play devil's advocate, because if Coleman didn't kill Kim and the first jury came back hung, he realized what law enforcement and the system could do to Mr. Wilson when he knew Mr. Wilson hadn't killed her. I might have cut my bracelet and run for the hills myself, because that meant I was next on the firing line. So I think that when Mr. Wilson didn't get convicted of this crime, that he thought he had to now worry about himself, and he got out of town. Now, if he was the killer and he got out of town, it is likely because he felt that Mr. Wilson wasn't going to be convicted of the crime and that they were going to proceed to look for other suspects, but they stopped short. And in fact, in Coleman's own testimony, they didn't take any evidence from him that night. So it does appear at a later date that he did some type of a rape kit for the city. But in the beginning, they took nothing from him, and they just absolutely hemmed up Wilson and pinned everything on Wilson. And he's the one that found the body. So the judge says to the jury, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back on the record, which will reflect counsel are present, the defendant is present, and all members of the panel. What we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, at this time is to read into the record the individual who is not available to testify. And it is important for you to understand, it's not for you to wonder why or to in any way concern yourselves with the reason for this witness not being present. Okay. The parties have stipulated that he is unavailable to testify, and in lieu of his physical presence here in court, the parties have agreed that they will read into the record testimony that this witness has given in a previous proceeding, and the process will be to have an individual who is actually a deputy district attorney and a colleague of Ms. Condren play the part of the witness, and Ms. Condren will play her role of the district attorney, and Mr. Parascu will play the part of the defense attorney, and they will merely question and the witness will respond. Is that typical, Nolan? You left, Nolan.
Hold on a second.
I think he's grabbing a cup of coffee.
Right?
What was your question?
So basically, well, you just missed everything I said, and I don't want to reread that for the
I heard it. I heard you talking. I was in the room. I had to shut the door.
Well, they're literally assigning characters, actors to a trial transcript and asking them to play a role as if they are capable of literally questioning and getting real answers. They're really just going down this like they were reading a script for a movie, basically, for the jury to hear, which I don't know. Have you ever seen that happen?
No. Normally you would have the judge read it into the record.
Yep, nope. Here they played the part. So Condren acted as the DA. One of her colleagues acted as William Coleman, and then Mr. Parsco acted as the public defender in the questions and the testimony we're about to read.
Was Condren not the original DA anyway?
No, she was.
She was. Okay, so she
as
played
far
herself.
as I know, she played
Okay.
herself. And so the court continues to say, so what you are to do is to take this testimony in the same sense with the same credibility. Oh my God, I don't even understand saying the man is gone. You've told the jury, don't worry about why he's not here, but take this with the same credibility as if he was here on the stand. This sounds like a complete freaking like Twilight Zone movie.
Yeah,
Same
they have no way of judging his credibility. You can't hear his inflections. You can't see his facial expression.
No, nothing. You've got nothing. Same rules that I previously explained to you in determining what this witness says. In other words, his credibility, his entire, like everything is supposed. So basically, I wrote, jury is deprived of seeing Mr. Coleman respond and his demeanor during that response.
No doubt.
So further instructions from the judge was, in other words, his credibility, his entire probative value of his evidence is under the same rules, under the same limitations as any witness that would be called to testify in person. So there's no difference in that at all. Now, this is going to be read into the record, but you won't have a copy of it to follow because it's not for you to feel that it's any more important because it has been transcribed or there's any more to significance to it because a written copy has been made of it. And you're, again, just to base your determination of the issues, in this case, solely upon the testimony, just as if this individual were physically present. I understand that the full name of this individual, it is William, and Mr. Parsco, yes, Your Honor, the court says William Coleman. So that causes us to climb right on in. And I thought some of the most important parts of this testimony is his arrival at home. So he gets off work at 7 o'clock. He makes his way to Safeway. Yes.
Good point. Yeah, it's by doing it this way, it almost adds more credibility to this testimony. It makes it really, really important. And it almost goes down as fact when it may not necessarily be fact.
And there's no way
for this fact.
Right. And I can tell you that
doing it that way.
The average adult will remember about 45 minutes of being spoken to, whether you're in a class setting or on Zoom or otherwise. You really can't feed too much at somebody and expect them to remember all aspects of it. And the court said specifically, we're not giving you a copy of this. So they have nothing to take back with them to mull over to read how ridiculous this is. And I'm sure with all the confusion, you know how it works in the courtroom. Sometimes there's objections. Sometimes there's, you didn't say that correctly, or and everybody gets all confused, right? About what was really said, what was really the question. And now how am I supposed to answer that? You're going to see a lot of that in these transcripts, which makes it very complicated for a jury to understand how many times this man lied. If they could have taken this 28-page transcript back to the jury room and highlighted all the different lies, as I have actually highlighted in this presentation, they would have had a better understanding of what Coleman, and Coleman not once implicates Wilson. So let me just make that clear. This testimony does nothing but make him look fishy and squirmy. So he gets off work at 7 o'clock. He goes to Safeway to pick up some food. He then takes his bike and he's riding a bike back. So he rides it down Colorado in Midtown, Colorado Avenue in Middlefield. And then he returns home and he says, yep, I parked my bike in the driveway where she parked her car and around the side of the bushes. And Mr. Parsco, or I'm sorry, Miss Condren says, now tell me about her car. Was it in the driveway at that time? And he says, Coleman says, when I got home that Saturday at 8:30, between 8:30 and 8:45, her car was in the driveway. Yes. Now we have that paradox, right? When the taxi cab driver picks up Wilson and Wilson both testified to a car being under the car cover that was not Miss Kim's car, that car and car cover is now gone. And Coleman has never seen that car and car cover because he's been gone at work all day. But he's now home and the BMW is back in the driveway. So we know that up until this point and we're going to hear in this testimony, he actually has dinner with her this night, which makes it even stranger.
What time does Wilson get home?
He doesn't get home until approximately almost 3 a.m.
In the morning, okay, the next day. So the woman, the victim, and Coleman are the only two people there from 8:45 to 3 a.m.
Correct.
So why focus on Wilson over Coleman? I would look heavily into both of them.
Exactly.
The third party who owned the other car with the cover on it.
Yeah, it makes me wonder who Coleman was. So, anyways, he says, let's see. Condren shows him some exhibits and marks these photographs and asks if this is Miss Kim's car. And Coleman says, yes, that is her car. And the question is, okay, is that where it's parked? And he said, put them back here. That's correct. Was it covered at the time you lived there? Was it covered with a car cover? Nope. The car was never covered. The paint was, you could see the paint color. It was never covered. So this is Coleman stating that she's never had a car cover. Her family says she's never had a car cover. So why is this whole car cover and the vehicle with the car cover being kept from the jury? Because again, it's third-party culpability. So
it's bad by the prosecution and bad by the judge.
Exactly.
Judge had discretion to allow it.
Right. He did, but they didn't. They were, again, Condren was so hot and heavy on excluding every piece that would identify somebody else as being responsible.
Well, the defense attorney should have jumped all over it and said, Judge, no, it's Mrs. Condren doesn't run this courtroom, you do.
Right, right. Is this a fair trial or not?
Yeah, that's grounds for appeal right there. Exclusion of important evidence, by the prosecution and by the judge.
Well, and evidently,
did you ever find out if there was an appeal?
I have not yet. As a matter of fact, that is one of those questions. I was trying to remember everything that we asked last week, but I did shoot off a couple letters to Mr. Wilson this week.
Okay.
But in this whole entire thing, it most definitely is. So basically, theory, this could have been the killer, and they didn't want their car to be viewed by anyone who passed, as I've said before. The time frame also supports that Kim was alive when Mr. Wilson left home, and that she left with the owner of said car undercover in her own BMW that then came back long after Wilson had left. Mr. Coleman could have merely been scared that he would have come under scrutiny if the second trial acquitted Mr. Wilson, and he saw firsthand what the law enforcement and the DA were capable of doing, because he knew that Mr. Wilson couldn't have committed the crime yet was being tried for it. So cutting the ankle bracelet, I did get that question out to find out why he was on an ankle bracelet. Was this something that the police department had done to keep track of him as a second possible suspect, or was he on parole or probation of some sort that required him to wear an ankle monitor? I'm hoping to get that answer here soon. Either way, he cuts that ankle bracelet.
If any of the neighbors were questioned about the car and what time it arrived and what time it left?
I haven't seen any of that investigative work. I haven't seen any of those reports by any investigators. That would have been one of the
first things I did. If I'm a detective, go talk to the neighbors.
Yeah. And when they talked to the neighbors, it seemed like they were more collecting, personal information in regards to the attitude of Miss Kim, in which case they all said she was rather aggressive. People didn't really talk to her. She kept to herself, but they had seen some different acts from her that showed and supported that she was an aggressive and almost even violent person who will hop on a vehicle and chase people down. Coleman arrives home 8:30, 8:45, 7 hours before Mr. Wilson finds her body. So we want to keep that 7-hour time frame in our mind because of that 911 call when Coleman says that she had been dead for 4 to 5 hours, maybe even longer. This at least supports at a minimum that Coleman knew she was dead before Mr. Wilson found her, and we'll get into that testimony as well.
And that would support that Wilson didn't kill her because he didn't get home till 3 and he found her shortly thereafter, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. He couldn't have killed her. And even the forensics support this time frame or this purported time frame that Coleman is given to 911 operators, and what he testifies to fits in line. And the only people that would have been home at that point in time would have been Kim and Coleman.
Can I ask real quick? Can I ask a question? Is this evidence coming from the medical examiner connected to the DA or
What
whatever?
evidence?
Everything that they're saying, the time that she was estimated to be deceased, the time frame, everything.
Their witnesses, their forensic expert witnesses, based on the rigor mortis, attempted to state that she was killed between 12:48 p.m. and 1:58 p.m. on Saturday, when in fact she was killed more like, based on actual forensics, she was killed more at about probably midnight, 11 o'clock midnight.
That's why
it
I was
made more sense how the rigor mortis played itself out, and she was completely out of rigor at 9:30 a.m. on Monday morning. So that 24-hour period, and even a few hours extra for the consideration that she was in a cool basement, which would have slowed the process, and that she was then taken to the morgue where she was kept in a refrigeration unit, that would have slowed the rigor mortis process again, but that would have put it properly in a time frame at about 11 p.m. midnight of Saturday night.
So that's why I asked that, because I'm seeing that a lot in some very corrupt local governments. So
well, when you're narrating your story, you get your experts to testify. If they're hired guns, as it sounds like these individuals were, you get them to testify to the affirmative of your theory.
Yeah, to go like
that
this.
Doesn't match their theory of Wilson being culpable. It actually exonerates Wilson because he wasn't home at the time of death.
It was future testimony by these same experts in other cases after the fact, where they actually correctly testified to the proper hours and time that rigor mortis took to set in.
Oh, okay.
They tried to say yes. So once you narrow in the actual time frame that it takes for rigor mortis to occur and to leave the body, that would have already have happened had she been in, let's say, a room temperature room. But you got to add some time to it because she was in cool places like the basement and the refrigeration unit. So another thing that Coleman testified to was that other than saying I found, so he's being asked how it was that he was dressed when Wilson walked into his room, and asked whether or not Wilson said anything to him through the door. My client's interpretation of this evening is that he yelled for Coleman to come help me. I found Jean, and he got no response. And he knocked on the door, no response. Then he opened the door and walked in on Coleman, and he sees Coleman standing there fully dressed, shoes, pants, shirt, sweatshirt, as if he's going to be leaving the house when it's 4 a.m. and he works more of a mid shift. As we know, he doesn't get off till 7 p.m. every night. So we probably start somewhere around, I'm going to guess, 11 a.m. in the morning. There's no reason for him to be fully dressed at 4 a.m. So he's trying to tell the jury that other than saying, I found Jean, did he say anything else? Coleman said, nope. Did he say, come with me? Coleman, nope. Did you say anything to him? Coleman, nope. Did you say where? The minute Coleman says, the minute he mentioned Jean's name, I followed him. So he claimed, so you're going to hear him go back and forth saying that Wilson didn't say anything about Jean, to all he did was knock on the door once, to how he was dressed. So there's a whole lot of back and forth, like I said, in this. So now he's being asked if there's a light switch that controls a light down in the hallway, and he indicates yes. Where is that light switch located? Downstairs. Where downstairs? I think on the right-hand side of the steps. On the stairway. Yeah. How far down do you have to go? Almost to the bottom, he says. But this light and door, the door to the basement was open and the light was on when Wilson found Jean. That's how he even noticed that she was there, because it was odd for that door to be open and a light to be on. And he looked down, saw Jean at the bottom of the stairs, and then proceeded to attempt to get Coleman to come assist him in checking on her and calling 911. So
why wouldn't Coleman notice the light and the door of basement being open, and then didn't he have dinner with the woman? So why wouldn't he notice she's not around anymore?
We're going to get into that testimony. You're absolutely correct. His room does not have a secondary door on the rear side to get out like Wilson's does. So Wilson has a good explanation. He usually leaves by the outside doorway to his room that allows him to exit and come in without even coming into the main part of the house. The difference is that Coleman's bedroom right next to Kim's bedroom does not have a separate exit entry to the outside. So he literally has to come through the house. 100%. All right. Let's see. So now he's being questioned as to whether or not the stairway is wide, and that's because Coleman states that he entered the basement stairwell and he only went 2 steps down, went down to take the 3rd step, and looked down and claims that he saw the lifeless, pale white body of Miss Kim, half dressed, knew that she had been dead for hours because he claimed her legs were stiff, and that appeared to be rigor mortis, which I couldn't tell you what rigor mortis looks like. And if you've never studied these things, it's not something that the average person is going to be aware of. But the question is that a wide stairway or not? He says yes. Question, is it wide? How wide do you want it to be? Coleman says. Like, how is that an answer? Would you describe it as wide or describe it as narrow? He says wide. So do you know how wide it is? No, I have no idea how wide it is. But this all plays into his visibility of Miss Kim, what he can see that Mr. Wilson is doing, and also the time frames are going to flip-flop back and forth about how long he actually stood on that 3rd step. So it says, what condition was she? Her head, or she was okay, I'm sorry. The question is, in what condition was she? And Coleman says, what condition was she? Her head, or she was fully exposed from the waist up, but the robe she was wearing covered the lower part of her. Did you see any blood? Yes, there was blood on her, was lying on the steps. The blood was thicker and darker than the outside perimeter of the floor. The basement was lighter, but it was pretty far out. I'm like, I don't even know what to make. I can't make sense of his answers sometimes.
Right.
So did you want, it says, let's see. He says, at any time when you went down the stairs, did you say anything to Mr. Wilson? Coleman says, I told Peter, don't touch anything. Why did you say that? Because I don't know what was wrong. I tell him don't touch it. And some of his answers also makes me feel like English isn't his first language, because the court reporter is supposed to be recording what he says precisely. And a lot of times it sounds like he's missing a lot of linguistics in there that would indicate that English was his first language. Didn't you want to help Miss Kim? She was already dead. There wasn't anything I could do for her. How does he know this even if we topped off at the 2 minutes he said he stood at the top of that stairwell where he couldn't see anything and what Mr. Wilson was doing, he has noticed that this woman is dead and there's nothing I can do for her. Why did you think that? Because her legs were perfectly straight, and I figured rigor mortis set in. So that means he must have known she was dead in order for him to have figured rigor mortis had set in.
I don't want to be too gross, but the position, I mean, my mother used to teach us what rigor mortis looked like when animals were deceased in the park.
Okay, so, well, but most people don't.
But you can know that you can see the difference. You can tell.
But most people don't look. Here's the thing. I'm not going to argue whether or not he knew what rigor mortis looked like. The fact that he told 911 she'd been dead 4 to 5 hours. The fact that he says that he believed rigor mortis had already set in.
How would he know that?
Yeah, exactly. He never went down the stairs. It was an ill-lit stairwell. There was Mr. Wilson in the way. We heard Coleman just say that it is a wide stairwell, as if to say that he can stare right straight down it. And you're going to find that his testimony later does not indicate that. So his knowledge of this sounds more to me like he was aware she was dead, either by the time he got home or he did it himself. All right. So here they ask him how long he was there standing. He says a couple minutes. And Linda Condren says a couple minutes, as if a question. And again, he says, well, maybe a minute. I looked at it and I talked to, and then he cut off. She says, I'm sorry, I don't believe that was read correctly. He says, again, well, maybe a minute. I looked at it and I talked, and again, cut off. So Coleman never finished the statement. Just, I looked at it and but he was saying he was there for a couple minutes. So now she says, you said in talking just a moment ago, he said the board. He said he was trying to get the board off her. Now, physically at the time, was he trying to get the board off of her? Coleman says, yeah. Did you see that? Yes. Well, then was he not to the right then, was he? No, he be, spelled incorrectly, to the left. He was moving about. He was, Coleman says he was down there walking around. So in some statements, he says that Wilson never left the actual landing pad at the bottom of the steps, but now he's saying that he's walking around. So he was down there walking around would be to the left. Did you ever see him?
And why would he touch the board?
Well, because Mr. Wilson was trying to help her. Well, it was a 4x12. I don't think anybody's wielding a 4x12. That's a pretty darn big beam. Mr. Wilson told me that when he saw her at the bottom of the stairs, she had a 4x12 laid across her chest. He said he attempted to remove the 4x12, but it was too heavy for him to pick up and get off of her. So that's telling me it's quite large. And if you've ever lifted, I've lifted 4x4s and 4x6s that are 8 to 12 feet long. And I'm telling you, that is no joke. That is a lot of stinking weight. So a 4x12 is going to be even heavier. It says, did you ever see him leave the stairway and go into the basement? No. So again, he's always stood right on the stoop of these stairs. Did you ever see him step on the landing? Nope. So he never came off these stairs. Yet just previous to that, the questions was, as I saw him walking around to the left. It says, you did see him trying to move the board. I seen him try to move the board. So that's Coleman's testimony. And then he's asked, during the time that you lived at that residence and during the time that Mr. Wilson lived at that residence, do you recall him ever going downstairs? No, he never went down there. Ever? There wasn't anything down there that was his. Why would he go down there? So evidently nobody goes into this basement, but there's that cigarette butt and there's those leaves that we can't explain how they get there. Says, does that house, old house, get drafty sometimes? Yes. Is that because if you left the door open to the basement, did that make a draft come in and bring in cold air or damp air or anything like that from the basement? He says, nope. Let's see if there's anything. Okay, so in this next one, he says, well, then when I asked you if you told Mock that, why are you saying yes? He says, I don't think I told him that. Okay, well, did I mention, let's see, wait a minute. Let me see what that first question was. Okay, that piece of wood that was lying across Jean, had you been in the basement before? Did you ever see that piece of wood before? No, I have never seen it. Did you speak to, besides Officer Trujillo, did you speak to and were you interviewed by Dennis Burns? That's correct. Did you also speak to and were you interviewed by Detective Yore? I'm not certain about that. How are you not certain about that? He's the arresting officer. I mean, he's the one in charge. Well, then when I asked you if you told Mock that, why are you saying yes? I don't think I told him that. Okay, well, did I mention you to when we had a conversation at one point this afternoon that you may have said several things about different issues? Yes, that is correct. So this is Condren coaxing. You've said different things about different issues. Yes, that's correct. I'd like to show you a portion of Mock's report. Counsel, this is page 2 of Mock's report or page 3 of all of the reports. And I've highlighted the first full sentence of that report and the second sentence as well. Please read that to yourself. Now, I wish I knew what that was because they don't ask these questions. Just read it to yourself. And these are reports that he's given in previous testimony to law enforcement.
Leading the witness. Where's the judge? Why isn't he saying, shut up?
Well, you got to remember at this point, this is now being just read off the transcript. There is no judge interaction. There's no, this is so wrong.
But who's speaking for Coleman?
A deputy DA colleague of Linda Condren is speaking, is reading the answers. So he says, okay. And she says, okay, do you see that now? He says, yes, I see that. She said, did you tell Officer Mock that? Yes, sir. That's correct. Is that the stairway was narrow? And he answers that the stairway was narrow. So here he just said wide. And this is the reason why he could see everything standing from the top 3 steps. Now he's saying that he originally told everybody it was narrow. And did you tell Mock because it was narrow, you could not see past Peter Wilson? That is correct. So this is what he's told the officers. But
why do they need to ask if it was narrow or wide? If the officers obviously were on that stairwell and they knew the size of it, right? So I guess they're just asking to determine his credibility.
Right. Well, because he's later stating that he
himself.
saw, that he saw Kim dead.
Yeah.
He saw the pale face. He saw her undressed. But now it's showing that he has already told police officers in the first stage that it was a narrow thing or a narrow hallway or stairwell, and he can't see past Wilson, who is basically on this side, on the stairwell side of Miss Kim, who's at the bottom of the landing pad. So basically it's narrow and he can't see what's going on because he can't see past Wilson. Did you tell Officer Mock that because you couldn't see past Wilson? And did you tell him that is one of the reasons that Wilson was moving around back and forth at the bottom of the stairway? That is correct. So now by the cross-examination by Mr. Parasco says, did you report to your employer that you had your hand or had hurt your hand on the espresso machine? So there's this great big thing about him hurting both of his knuckles. And he claims that he was riding his bicycle, ran into a wall, accidentally scraped up his knuckles. Then at work while doing dishes and other things, that those cuts just became even more prominent and wider and cracked more. So that he then actually only told the police department that he had injured his hands on the espresso machine, totally forgetting the fact that he never injured his hands on the espresso machine. And that's what we're going to hear. He said, I told her I hit it first. I told her I laid my bike scratched against the building. I told her from this scratch and see, I am. And then I told her when I worked the machine gripping the thing, I got to some pharmacy, got some medicine and put it on it. And it was okay. He's not answering the questions. It's like he's dancing around with these answers. Okay, so you told your employer, basically. He said, Miss Chung, Marion Chung. You told Marion Chung that you had injured the finger while on your hand while on a bicycle. He says that's correct. So he tells his employer he hurt his hands on a bicycle and later re-injured it on the coffee machine. Well, when you gripped it, when I working there, gripping it. So again, when I working there, his linguistics is just not like it's English. And maybe Mr. Wilson is correct that he is not American, but he couldn't identify his race. So Mr. Parsku, when you were talking to any of these police officers after Miss Kim was found dead, did you tell them about hurting your hand on the bicycle? Coleman says, no. I told them no. I told them, Miss Chung, I heard it on the machines. It was on the machines. Why didn't you tell them how you heard it on the bicycle? Miss Condren, objection. That's not correct. No, she's objecting. Mr. Parsku, why didn't you tell him how you heard it on the bicycle? I didn't think that at the moment. What? You didn't think to tell them how you originally injured your hands? Because washing dishes can irritate it. Absolutely 100%. Grabbing something, especially if it's on your knuckles, can cause the knuckles to expand and crack and bleed old hurt wounds. But he says nothing and mentions nothing of this bicycle at the time. Let's see. I guess my hand, both my fist on the side of the building, both is hard like this. Oh, and this, I'm sorry, I should have read the question first. It says, which of those cuts were caused by the bicycle? I guess my hand, both my fist on the side of the building, both is hard like this, and cuts off again. So he's, again, the question was, which of those cuts were caused by the bicycle? And he dances around it in a way that doesn't even identify which ones occurred from that. All right. So Mr. Parascu says, okay, and the injury that is depicted in this photograph, Coleman says, comes from hitting the building and bending, and then I stopped it from bleeding when I was working in the cleaning machine making espresso. The cuts seems to get wider and more deeper. Parascu says, you didn't cause any new injuries on the espresso machine? No, it just irritated the one that was already on my hands. So now, oh gosh, we did not make it near as far as I thought we were going to make it today. So now he's stating that it just irritated it, but he told the police officers that he injured it on the espresso machine. Let's see. What kind of things do you do at the cafe? I don't think we need to know that. He washes dishes. We already discussed that. Says, wait until I finish. For the whole 3 or 4 hours your hands are in water. He says, when I was washing dishes, yes, but not your hands are not in the water for the whole 3 hours. Take them out, then do something else, and I wash again, put them back in the thing. Is there a particular reason why you didn't tell the police when they asked you about the cut on your hand about this bicycle incident? I didn't think of it. I said I didn't think of it because I got from there, I was making this espresso and you opened it up, and again, he doesn't answer the questions. Wait until I finish. Was work on this espresso machine? He says yes, because it was scratches at first or a scratch. Then I went on the machine. It opened the cuts, made it more of a cut than a bruise. Not a bruise, but a scratch. So again, he's not answering the questions. I know that it's that's why I just picked out some of these pieces so people could kind of get an idea of how Coleman is answering these questions and how confusing all of this is. Now, Mr. Parsku says
Coleman looks shady.
And it gets even shadier. Like this just gets even shadier as we go. He says, what did you get Friday night? Do you remember? Now, this is in regards to the meal. He says, nope, I don't remember Friday night. He says, when you came in at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work on Saturday morning, did you notice whether or not the light was on in her room? He says, it wasn't. It was not on. Was the door closed? The door closed. And is that usually the way it was when she went to bed to keep her door closed? Her door is always closed. She went to bed. She closed the door. Her door is immediately next to the bathroom door. Coleman says, yes. Okay, Mr. Wilson, door's right next to hers at the end of the hallway. And he answers one of his doors, yes. So this confirms my client's testimony that he states he has a back entry. So we now know that he does have a way to access his room without coming through the house.
Right.
He says, question. Now it seems that to you that it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when you heard Mr. Wilson banging on your door, knocking on your door. Is that correct? Coleman says, I'd say about 3 o'clock to me. I don't have my watch on. I think about 3 o'clock. He said, and you said that when you heard that you immediately put some clothes on because you assumed it might be Jean. He says, that is correct. Isn't it true that when Mr. Wilson knocked on the door, he said, I found Jean, hurry up and come with me? Nope. But that's what he told the officers. We just read that out of his own transcript. Nope, he didn't say that. He did not say that? No. Okay, is your testimony that he didn't say anything until you came and opened the door? He knocked on the door and said, William. By that time, I did. I already got my pants on and shirt. So I opened the door a little bit. He is standing there. How many times did he knock before you put your pants on? He knocked once. Like that, I have jumped up, put my pants on, and went to the door, opened it, and he is on the other side. Do you remember telling Officer Mock that Peter Wilson was knocking on your bedroom door and Mr. Wilson told you I found Jean, hurry up and come with me? Nope. Do you remember telling Officer Burns that Mr. Wilson actually opened the door and said, I found Jean? That's what my client states was the story that night. Nope. Are you saying you didn't say that? He didn't say that. So he's asking whether or not Coleman said it, and Coleman's saying, no, Wilson didn't say that. He's not answering the questions. He says, okay, did you not say to that to Officer Burns? He says, no. And he says, this is in regards to a question as to him having his shoes on. So now he's only said, I put my pants on once. I put my pants and shirt on a second time. And now he's got shoes on. And his answer when asked if he's got shoes on, he says, yes, she had, or as if he was allowed to wear shoes in the house. Yes, she had shoes in these boxes behind the door. I take my shoes off and put them on top of the dryer. When you're in the house, you always keep your shoes on the dryer. Miss Kim said, I can't wear shoes in the house. I wear my socks. When you got up early Sunday morning with Mr. Wilson, you didn't have your shoes on in your room. He said, I had put my work shoes, the shoes I go to work, on top of the dryer, other shoes I have in my room, and I put by my bed. So when you went to bed Saturday night, you took the shoes from your closet out and put them by your bed. Yes, by the bed. I think that's all we're going to be able to get to. We've got about 10 seconds to sign off, you guys. We did actually make it a lot farther than I thought we would. Yay. But we still have about 10 or 15 slides, including the laundering of money and drug trafficking that we'll be going through next week. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Nolan. Thank you, Harriet. We'll pick up and we'll have a better question series next week.
We got it.
We haven't asked about the appeal.
I will.
Okay. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Happy 13th, guys.
Yeah.
Yep.